Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest.
Hey guys, this is JJ.
And I'm Natalie.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver. So let's get started. So we have our friend bestie, Kimberly Whiter, who is joining us today. And she'll be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly of all things kind of around caregiving. And I think we all know we can relate. So Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Kimberly, our sister in care?
I would be absolutely honored. So, Kimberly is the owner and the CEO of Elder Care Solutions, and her goal in very small terms is to prevent the financial crisis millions of families across the U.S. face today in long-term care. And that is families like ours as well. Before that, however, it was a little bit different. She started her career as a laboratory scientist. Her days were spent with her eyes in a microscope searching cells for pathology. We, like ourselves, have no idea how she got into caregiving, so we're hopeful that she will share that with us. I think, however, we would be remiss if we did not say Kim is a mentor for us.
Love her.
We love her. And she is really a friend for these sisters. She is absolutely out to change the caregiving community. She founded the first caregiving colloquium, which is absolutely Kim, the hardest word to say ever.
I can't even spell it.
And that event brought industry leaders and change makers together because care for the caregiver has to be done absolutely differently. When I personally heard her speak there, she shared how her own caregiving journey began through an early morning call from her young daughter. And it said to me that none of us are truly prepared and care happens in the blink of an eye. And I think that touched me because that really is how my journey started with Mom. And I can only say, welcome, Kim. And we cannot wait to hear from you. So, Natalie.
Oh, yeah.
Just turn Kim on.
Let you know what,
ask her questions.
You know what? I think, and I want to echo, Kim is such an amazing person, and she is a cheerleader for everyone. And, you know, there's so much competition, Jay, around in other industries, but what we did and what Kim did, actually bringing all the leaders from around the country for the Care Colloquium, was made it a co-opetition. And all we did was coordinate and collaborate. It was so exciting. So anyway, I could just say, like, sing Kim's praises to the moons, but I'm going to let Kim talk. So Kim, why don't you tell us about your caregiving journey?
So one, I'll say, I know colloquium is a hard word, and we all have those words that, like, every time we try to type it, it never ends up being correct. I cannot spell reluctant. Every time I try to type about you guys or write something to you, I get reluctant wrong every time. And I'm like, okay, this is my hang up word.
Yes.
So there's that. So you got me back, right?
Okay.
I gave you colloquium and you gave me reluctant. Yeah.
You're welcome.
When I talk about care, so I really do a lot of work where I bring leaders together in care. You know, so all these people who have turned a care journey into a business, or they're really trying to make care look better for the people that they know are going to experience it, it after them. And what happens is in the care economy, so where all these businesses live, this field that is ours, this becomes like our identification card. So when we're networking with each other, they're like, tell me your care story. And then, like, I'll validate you based on what you share. So there's this handing over of our stories. And I understand that because there's we want to know that whoever is putting work out there, gets it. They've been through it. I personally have been very challenged by that. And I have I've had my card, but I've just kind of kept it in my pocket or really close to my heart. Because for me, it took some time. One, I'm sure as you guys also, everybody experiences this, it takes a while before you can just talk about it. For you to get the words past your lips and you not break down. It's too emotional to go through that process. And so I needed time for that. And then one of my care stories involves someone who, they're my age, they're still alive. Whatever I say could potentially get back to them. They could hear it. And I'm very careful not to share other people's stories. Everyone has the right to tell their story themselves. Right. So I really had to dance that line between which part of this is my story, because there were pieces to the care that were mine, that, this is what I went through. And then there were pieces that that was really more them. And this is just my reaction to that,
Right.
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
And because I do exist in this care space, I never want to put out a version of that story where it comes across like I'm leveraging it to earn money or to gain from it, because that's not the case. That's not my goal at all. So I will lay out one, I'm a mom, and that is care. So I know a lot of times we talk about care from the elder care perspective, and my business does focus on that. I'm helping people specifically caring for aging loved ones. Yeah. But care starts when you give birth to that child, right? And I have two. And so for 12 years now, I have been a mom to two children, and that has had some, as a woman who believes in having a full career and having a strong identity outside of motherhood, that has had a lot of challenges. I did provide care for their father, who I am no longer with. It's been about 6 years, and he went through a very scary, life-threatening health incident. And I stepped in and just was that person who could just help usher him through that. And I am now partnered with my life partner, who is Bonnie Chavez, and she recently broke all the bones in her body. Not really, but she broke her arm, and sprains everywhere, and I had to care for her. And so I've had these different care experiences, and there's been moments of my life that I have done that. Am I always going to get thrust into this position? And it feels like it's frequent. The motherhood is always there, but then this happens, well, Kim will help, and this happens, and Kim's there for me. And sometimes that feels hard, and sometimes you don't want to do it. And so navigating that, I think, has been a roller coaster. So I'm going to ask, which care story would you like for me to talk about?
Okay, so it's funny because Bonnie is actually going to be on the podcast too, and which makes it
her story. That's right.
She will. But I think, I'll tell you this. Yours is, you have a unique story, because it's one thing to care for your partner or your spouse, for example. I cared for Jason during his cancer journey. And honestly, when you're married, you care for each other. But to understand how it shifts, the hat shift I didn't expect it. And to lose I lost my wife status. I took that hat off when he got sick, because I had to do so many others. But I think yours is unique because you cared for your ex-husband. And that is way more, because most people think of caregivers as a spouse to a parent to a child, but you went way beyond. And most people will be I don't know that I could do that. So I think
I got that feedback, and I just never questioned. I just took the action. So my crisis response, and care often starts in a crisis. And the reason we can identify with that crisis dump is because that's what happens. Like accidents happen, strokes, cancer diagnoses. Like we often in the care economy, we're like, I wish people would plan, but you can't plan for some of this stuff. Like these are things that happen spontaneously. So my crisis response is I start operationalizing. So I go calm. I literally feel like everything in my body slows down. And I'm like, okay, here's what's happening. This is what needs to get done. Here's how I'm going to go about doing it. So like, I'm really good to have on your crisis team because I'll like, okay, step one, this is what we need to do.
I like that. Somebody taking charge.
Yeah, that's what I do. Right. And then my emotional response will come when it's all finished.
Yeah.
It'll come later. Right. So January 1st, 2020, at 6:30 in the morning, my phone rang and it was my daughter. And at the time she was 9 years old. And the reason that she was calling me and she wasn't with me is that it was the week where she was with her dad. And so it just happened that he had them on New Year's Eve. And I thought this is really early for her to call. But maybe she woke up early and she just wants to be like, Happy New Year. Because 2020, we all had this like, oh my God, we're entering a new decade, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I answered the phone and I say, hi, honey, how are you doing? And no words, but I could hear that she was crying. And so then just instant nightmare. Like that's my worst fear, is that something is happening to my children and they're not with me. So I can't be protecting them, right? My next memory is I'm driving. So somehow I got out of my bedroom with enough clothes on and I was in the car driving and just headed to where I knew she was. And at this point, like I still hadn't even collected that information, but I was on my way. Someone grabbed the phone from her, which also terrified me. And it was the person that their dad had been seeing at the time. Thank God they were there. And what had happened is at 6 a.m., he shot up, like woke up, but just like shot up and then had a full body seizure. And it was a pretty long seizure, which scared her. And then he just like fell back down and was not breathing and was unconscious. And she couldn't get him to breathe. And he was out for like over 90 seconds. So a minute and a half of nothing. Was turning blue. She was like shaking him and in that process knocked him off the bed. And when he hit the ground, it like started him breathing again. So that's really what saved his life.
Yeah.
If that person would not have been there, I think this would have happened. He would have died and the girls would have found him in the morning. And so I'm so grateful that's not how that narrative went, because that would have been life-changing for them, you know? Yeah. So she had woken up the girls to ask for the address because she had called 911. So that's when everything started kind of like progressing at high momentum. And Lizzie had called me because like something's happening. I want to call mommy. And then she's crying because she's watching her dad be, you know, wheeled into the back of an ambulance. And I passed the ambulance on the way to the house, grabbed up the girls, took them with me. We went and got out of our PJs and then just headed straight to the ED. And we found out that he had a pretty massive brain tumor in the left temporal lobe. All the messaging for 2 days, like they, you know, were gathering blood work and MRIs and stuff. But every doctor that came in, they were like, you're going to die. We're looking at 3 months. Like this is what we were being told over and over. So we were living with that reality and functioning under that reality for the majority of January. And so when you have a seizure, you lose your driver's license. And so anytime there was a doctor's appointment, which there were many, because now there's this, like, you have a tumor, we need to figure out what to do, and we need to take a lot of pictures of it. So doctor's appointments, specialist appointments.
That's right.
Picking up medications. anytime you need to go anywhere, I was the sole mode of transportation.
Are you working during this time? I'm just interjecting.
I had just accepted, well, during this, about 2 weeks in, I accepted the opportunity to run Elder Care Solutions as its CEO.
All right, just curious.
Yeah.
Just in your free time, your COE.
Got it.
No worries.
Right. So transportation, or I would get a call. I think I just had a little seizure. Let's go to the ED. So drop everything and let's go do that. I also was like taking notes. So there would be phone calls and, he would just kind of download how he was feeling. I think he just needed that person to just like, this is what's going on. Cause it's terrifying, and I would take notes so we could see the trends of how like emotions or physical things. I was taking all the notes in the doctor's appointments and I was there. I was like in the doctor's appointment, communicating with the doctors. And at the time, it was just not something that he had the capacity to do because he was staring down his own mortality. And that was terrifying for him. And they put him on, it was multiple pretty strong anti-seizure medications because the margins of the tumor had hit a region where it was going to trigger seizures all the time, pretty much. So he needed like some strong meds, and anyone who's ever been on anti-seizure medications, one of the common side effects is suicidal thoughts. So he was very suicidal, and there was often a lot of calls of like, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, please don't. And we got to a point even where it was so often that I was getting these, this is how I'm feeling right now, that I would be like, just don't tell me. Maybe I need to not be involved in your plans. I don't know if I can carry this.
Yeah.
And all the while, I'm managing the girls' emotions. Like, so we have always parented them where we shared reality. Like, this is the reality of what life looks like right now, whatever's going on. So we would have done that anyway, but they were thrust into it from the beginning. So it's not like we had a choice. Like, they're going to ask questions. Well, what's going on now? What does it mean? So we just made them a part of the journey, like told them what happened after every doctor's appointment. We let them know the options that we had been laid with and the way we were thinking we were going to go. And we would ask, like, what do you think? And so they were, and for them, that really worked. For our children, that gave them some comfort that they were a part of the decision-making and understood every step that we were taking along the way. I was also making sure that they had support everywhere they went. So we had a meeting with their school. We talked to the principal and the vice principal and the guidance counselor and just said, this is what's going on in their life right now. If they break down in the middle of class or they say that I need to talk to someone, I want to make sure they have that wherever they are. And we were doing grief counseling just to like prepare and talk about emotions, In early February, there was this fork in the road all of a sudden where a neurosurgeon was like, I think we can get this out. So everything changed. Yeah. And that led to pre-surgical procedures to decide if this was something that could happen. And then the surgery. And on the other side of the surgery, there was speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And then when that got settled down, chemotherapy and radiation therapy, all the while needing transportation for everything.
Wow.
And just someone who's like looking at it from the 10,000 foot view. And then the girls are also on this journey watching their dad. Like, now he can't talk, but then he starts to talk a little bit better and he can't move this side of his body, but then he's able to do it. So there's this just long journey you're on. And yes, during that time, I'm working full time. I'm making schedules that often, like, my to-do list doesn't get checked off. My schedule goes differently than I thought it was going to go. I get a call. Oh, by the way, there's an appointment that I just scheduled for tomorrow. Because sometimes you can't even get, they call and they're like, there's a cancellation. We're going to get you in at 9 a.m. So then there's an appointment tomorrow. Can you take me? And the conscientious part of me, which is really high, would like my eye would twitch with the, yes, I can change everything in my life to make that happen. But then the empathy side of me would be like, this is just what it looks like right now, Kim, like, don't get upset. Yeah. So there's this like internal battle going on all the time. Currently, the tumor is gone. The margins have been kicked back. He is physically healthier than he's ever been in his entire life. The prognosis is usually this type of brain cancer. When you do these things, and we took all those steps, you have about 10 years. And then like, there's a pretty high risk. It starts to grow back around then. Mm-hmm. So that's the reality that everyone is sitting with. I can tell he's using these 10 years to be like the most positive that they can be, so very outdoorsy and doing a lot of balance in his day. So like, working some and then mountain biking or running and walking, and then 10 years is a long time in medicine. Like, who knows what would be available to us should this come back then, or he defeats the odds, which so many people do, like you don't know. Right. So there's the story, please.
How long did so how long was that journey?
Pretty much the most of, like, it ended in the fall of 2020. So as you know, COVID also happened. So for me, the week on, week off schedule that we had been following for about 4 years just like fell by the wayside immediately. Mm-hmm. So now the kids are with me 100% because physically he did not have the health or the ability to look after other people, Right. By the time we got to March and COVID hit, we were still in that. So now not only were the girls with me all the time, but all my support systems fell off. School went away, daycare went away, everything just fell away. So then they were with me 100% of the time, like for reals, like from the time we like 24/7, just like all the time. And then this situation that I had really taken very purposeful steps. I have not ever envisioned my life, even as a child, and I would play pretend. I was always a working mother. I was never a stay-at-home mom, right? And so for me, that was very important that was what my life looked like. And I'm thrust into this. And now here's all the homeschooling you're going to have to do with your children. Mm-hmm. And they were in 3rd and 4th grade at the time. Mm-hmm. And so it's like old enough that it wasn't just like coloring sheets. They actually like had math and history and English stuff to do. Yeah. But young enough that they were absolutely unable to self-regulate or do that independently. So I had to sit down and do it with them. And it was just, I could not do it all to like pick up care emergencies when it was happening and work and homeschool plus mom. So it became a choice like, what do I want to excel at today? If I successfully homeschooled and got them through all of their schoolwork, it took 4 to 5 hours of dedicated time to get them through all the tasks that they needed to get through. And just be like, cool, you did school for today, which meant that was 4 to 5 hours I could not work. Or I was going to be like, screw that today. I need to be an awesome CEO. And I would CEO really hard. Yeah. Or I would be like, there's a day coming up where there's appointments and I need to be around. I'm just going to be awesome at caregiving today. And that's what the day is going to look like. And don't feel guilty that like, you're not going to sit down and do anything for work. And the girls are not going to get any school done. Like it was one or the other. It was no way to be able to do all of it. There was no balance where I could do a little bit of all the things. Like it just didn't exist.
So during that time, I'm jumping in. So anybody else have questions, you just let me know. Cause I'm intrigued by the story. So I know because I love what Elder Care Solutions does, but it's my finance background that I'm like, yes, because this needs to be planned, because it was one of those things that we were not prepared for when mom got sick. Right. I mean, it's the scariest part of one of the scariest parts of our journey. It was like, whoa, finance and that preparation and that crisis is huge, I think, in the United States. So that journey you saw, and then is that like a catapult that you jumped on that trampoline and you saw it with that situation? And then we're like, okay, elder care solutions, did that like push that passion even more? Did that push you into a different direction once you were back in that? I mean, what did that do for the business? Did that change it?
Yeah, well, of course, it gave me this perspective of everywhere you go for answers, you don't find them.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like, okay, we're going to go talk to this person. And while you're thinking about like that meeting's coming up next Tuesday, maybe I'll find some stuff out. And then you have the meeting and you leave and you're like, I am not any farther ahead than I was when I walked in. Like, why are there no answers anywhere? So I experienced that. I experienced trying to tap into governmental systems. And in this case, not an elderly person. So Social Security disability was where we were going, and getting denied when you're like, literally, there's a tumor in his brain. Like, isn't this what this was? I can't think of another situation where this could get any worse. Like, you know, so those systems that you think are in place when you're like, okay, what if mom or dad needed help with this? Okay, well, these things are in place. I hear about it all the time. We're going to be okay. And then when it's time to tap into them, they can fail you. And then you're like, okay, so that didn't work. And then there was also like the estate planning piece. Like at the time, he was 36 and I was 37. Yes, we were split up. And so we were independent entities, and we should have had like our will in place and our powers of attorney and all that stuff, you know, but we didn't, because we were in our 30s, and that's so common. Yeah. And instantly it's like, you're going to die in 3 months. And he's like, shit, I got to get my affairs in order. So that was also a thing where like, we made the appointment and we went to a lawyer and we both like set up our stuff, because you're like, oh yeah, I guess you could die at 36. And so that's also a place where a lot of families, like it's one of those things you put on the back burner over and over and over and over again. And then something falls in your lap. And if you don't have it, like if he would have died that day, all this stuff, all these assets would have been lost, just like, poof, you know? And so you do have to just have someone who can help you navigate all of that, because by yourself, it's overwhelming and you just feel like you're treading water. Like you're just not getting you're not making up any ground. You're not getting anywhere. You're not finding the answers. And it's so easy to just give up. You just give up. Yeah.
You know, Kim, I'll say this. We had to get mom's power of attorney, medical power of attorney, all that stuff on the fly. And it was, and the other issue though is, and we've talked with other folks about this, is that after our dad passed 11 years ago, our mom didn't want to talk about finances. Our mom didn't want to talk about any of that stuff. And so because that generation and then it goes down and it becomes intergenerational, like silence. We don't talk about certain things. We don't talk about money and what's going to get, because everybody thinks of wills and they think these fighting when, you know, people are dead. And I'm like, whatever, I'm spending it all. And so, but the problem is that we didn't have any of the power of attorneys, and our moms, exactly what happened to you. Care starts in a crisis. It was 110% crisis for us. I was in Virginia, JJ was in North Carolina, and Emily was in Indiana, and our mom's in Tennessee. And we're trying to coordinate with family members, and we're like, holy crap, something bad has happened. And I'm calling people in Tennessee, and JJ gets in the car and just starts driving. And so that's what we do. We just kind of go. And Emily's like, tell me what I can do. And because we're trying to figure out, because Emily was the farthest away. And so I think that was the hardest part. And we're having our Aunt Jane, who everybody's going to know about Aunt Jane, because Jane is like our pseudo mom. She's the backup mom for our mom too. She's a family member. And so we're like, what do we need to do? And she's like, I will get this attorney and I will do this person. And I mean, it had to be a coordinated response. And I think that's the thing that I wish that we had.
Oh, yeah.
Beforehand. And I mean, and even with Jason, in my case, we had happened to do our will and all that stuff beforehand, but we were pushed into it. You know what I mean? Like we were like, we should probably do this because we started doing more financial planning, and our financial planner was like, you need to have a will, people. And we were like, okay, we'll go get one. And so had we not had these things in place, like for me and Jason, we had these things in place for our mom and every provider that we went to for the hospitals and stuff. Where's your medical power of attorney?
Right.
Where's this? We can't.
Yeah, they want it right away. And the thing, like I was in positions where I had to make decisions, especially post-surgery when like he was awake and conscious, but couldn't speak.
Right.
You know, so that's one of those qualifiers, you know, like he cannot communicate for himself. And so I had to do that for him. And I would not have been able to if I didn't have the authority to do it. And that's a situation that so many families are going to be in, especially with the huge trend of cognitive decline and how so many people are caring for an aging parent that falls somewhere on that dementia spectrum, right? And I say, like, as that progresses, you want to have stuff in place as early as possible when they can communicate, like, if I was in this position, this is how I would love for you to handle it. Because when you get past that, the amount of guilt you'll feel when you are needing to make those decisions and you're just not sure if that's how that person would have wanted it to go, you don't want to bring that onto yourself. Like guilt is one of those top 3 emotions for people who are caring for someone else. It's just like, did I do enough? Did I make the right decisions? Did I show up as much as I should have shown up? Like that, it's inevitable, you know?
So I have a technical, I know, before we jump into the lightning round, but I do have a technical question because I think there are a lot of people across the spectrum, regardless of caregiving position or not. So you have 3 different sisters here. I kind of know the answer, but I'm going to get it for others. So I know Natalie they have taken a lot of steps. So I know that she has all of her financial documentation and she's married. And so they have their POAs, they have their wills in place, they have their life wills. I think that's what it's called. They have all that planning in place. And I think I actually talked to her about it, and they've eliminated a lot of those things like what you're talking about, Kim, where if there was ever a time when I might be worried about decisions and helping that if something happened to both of them, I wouldn't have that concern. So I'm married and we aren't exactly as prepared. So first of all, for me, does marriage does that make it easier? For example, if Dexter were to become ill or I were to become ill or pass, does marriage say, okay, well, you can make those decisions? And I think a lot of people have that assumption that if the other partner says, okay, well, I pass, then it's just easy. And then thirdly, with Emily is not married, but has children. Is that easy? You know, if something happens, who makes the decisions for her if she becomes ill?
Good question.
There you go. Yeah. Because I think people need to know that if you've got someone that's single, right. What's there? And
that was the position I was in, right? Oh, and him, you know. So first of all, there's 4 big. These are the key ones that you really want to have in place. The will, which says when I pass, this is where I want all my stuff to go and how I want everything divvied up to beneficiaries. Yeah. The living will, which I'm still alive, but I'm in a difficult situation. So this is how I would like for people to make decisions about my stuff. And then you need to give certain people the decision-making power. So it's usually called the durable power of attorney for healthcare, and then also one for financial. You have to have most often separate ones. So someone who can make financial decisions, someone who can make healthcare decisions. They may not be the same person, or they may be the same person. Right?
Got it.
Usually, if you are legally married, then if these things aren't in place, then they will go to that person and you can be like, they are my spouse, we're legally married, and they will start accepting answers from you because there is like a legal agreement between you guys as being spouses, right?
Got it.
Yeah. Same thing with children. If there's a biological connection, they might pull but like financial, that's not just because you're someone's child doesn't mean you can get into your parents' bank account without a proper authoritative documents to do so. So could they say, like, I think mom would want that treatment, go for it, or don't flip the switch right now? Yeah. But could you go and pay for what, like a bill has come up and you need to pay for it and it's coming out of that bank account and you can't access that bank account? You might also be in that situation, so that's why you kind of want to, I have a friend who's been my friend since I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. So we have a 13-year invested relationship in each other, and I trust her with everything. And she's my power of attorney for all decisions. And I know that she will honor the person that I have chosen to be romantically involved with, to say, like, I'm making this decision and I'll include them. But she's just who I trust to do all the stuff. Yeah. Right.
Got it.
So what happens what happens if you're single, like in Emily's case? Like,
well, that is my case too. Like,
that's true. Okay. Right. So you have your person. So is there
now, if Bonnie and I get married, I will change that,
Right.
But when I set this up and I had no person in my life, I had a person to go to and identify and say, yeah. And for me, that was my best friend. For Emily, like, it could be a best friend for you. It could be one of your sisters. It could be whoever you're like, I trust this person. And you're not, there's also this piece when you set up those documents, the documents themselves are pretty vague. You're just saying, like, Natalie, you get to make financial decisions. And it's like you're me when you're talking to the financial institutions, period. And so you then have to kind of go back and do those instructions with that person and be like, okay, which I had to do. I had I grew a tumor on my ovary in 2021. It was benign, but I had to have surgery and get it out and get my ovary taken out. And so I sat down with my best friend and I was like, should something go wrong, this is how I want you to make decisions. Like, I need you to follow these things when it comes to finances, when it comes to my health. Like, if I'm going to have a physical disability, I'm okay. Like, so just like, give me the most fighting chance. If I'm going to be a vegetable, like, let's look at other decisions,
Right.
And because that's not a part of the legal documents, that's up to you to go and say, this is what I want, down to the nitty gritty. If you have to make decisions for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one more question before we do the lightning round, because this is important. And I think people want to understand. So most people, don't understand like the process, and it feels overwhelming. And I can say that when we did our will and everything, it was so easy. It was really, really easy. So that was good. But what about cost? Most people are then concerned about cost. People who are unlimited resources and say, I can't really afford this. Cause Jason and I paid, and I don't care, I paid $1,000 to have our will and all this stuff done. That's how much we paid for
and
us.
That's a pretty typical. The cheapest I've seen is I've shopped around for estate attorneys or elder law attorneys that do this type of work for families. Usually, I've seen a really great price at $250 per document, right? So,
so you got 4 documents together. So, it's $1,000.
And then I've seen some, they're like, to take it on, it's $5,000. And like, let's not use some of those. But then there's also families that have complicated situations. Like, there's multiple things, there's businesses maybe, and so you're going to need to take a deep dive, and those are going to be more expensive because there's a lot more to deal with. So yes, we're talking about legal stuff. That's like step one. You just want to have this stuff in place because crisis is often a part of care, and you just want to know everything has been decided and we have some stuff for that back end, not just death, just incapacitation, right? Like I can't make a decision because I'm going through a healthcare crisis, but then there's still like, you have to pay. You still have to pay for care. And that's really where I tackle down. So I will start how's your estate planning? Are these things in place? Are they updated? Do you know where they exist? If you need them, if something happened and you got that call today, do you know where to go to grab those papers? That's important. Yeah. All 3 of those things are important. But then also you're going to start getting bills, and you're going to have to start figuring out okay, that person is coming home and they need help. And some of that I'm going to do, and some of it I cannot do. How am I going to pay for that? And that's where we start, like, let's do a deep dive and find your resources. So I really look for tools, resources, organizations, grants, professionals. What are all the things out there that can help? And I develop relationships with them all so that I can, like, be that, let me help you navigate. I connect the dots for families because they can't go out there and find all the dots. They Google, like, okay, how do you pay for? And then the Google list, and they
it's awful.
The X out. They're just like, never mind.
It's got 1 million pages of options, and you're like, I just wanted the first one to be perfect.
And I will also say, everybody will, especially when you Google, like you just said, like you're wanting that first answer, that first thing to be an answer, right? There is no magic secret answer that somebody is sitting on that you're hoping you're going to find out when you talk to the right person. Somebody's like, okay, here it is. You met enough people. Here's the answer. That doesn't exist. Sorry. Okay. That way you could edit.
We're shameless. We just let it totally roll.
Okay. There's no magic answer. There are tons of answers that probably will work for you, but you're going to have to go out and find them. And they exist in a very fragmented way, and they're super siloed. So that's where you need help. You need that person who can, like, here's your dots. I'm going to connect it together for you. Or I'll go research some of this for you because I know what I should be looking for. You don't. That's where we're helping.
I love that. I think that's super important. I know that you have, I think it's a assessment tool on the website where it's a quick, like, answer a handful of these questions and it'll tell you if you're prepared. Because I know we've talked to other people and they talk about plan for risk. And so to me, I think you can plan for a crisis, sort of. And the sort of part is to have your documents in place. The sort of part is to have, who would be a part of my crisis kind of, or my response team to help me. Because I think you have a crisis response team. Like, if this happens, where the kids are going, where I'm going to have to do my, and then do I have an employer, depending, because most people are not the CEOs and they can make the decision easier. But regardless, kind of, okay, have a good relationship. So having a relationship with your employer is critical, I think, and with your supervisor to say, hey, if something happens, how does the company deal with that? And I don't think I can tell you, until I had lived experience, I don't know that I would think about asking that like a job interview. Like, in my decision to be employed by someone, do I ask about, like, hey, what's it like if there's a crisis? How do you guys respond to that with the employee? How well do you work with that? I just don't think people think to ask that because they don't plan for it. So,
sure. Hopefully now that we've been through COVID,
right?
Now we've experienced, like, when all the things that I use as supports, like, I bring my kids to school, I drop them off, I get a chunk of time to work before I have to go pick them up. If that went away because of a global pandemic, which we wouldn't have thought about before, how can you support in the way that we're going to handle that? Because all of a sudden that chunk of time goes away.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think we're more prepared to ask those kinds of questions, which might not be like, you're not dreaming up these, like, how would you support me if I got attacked by a bear if I'm hiking on Saturday? Like, you're not thinking of these specific situations.
It can happen.
We've now been through a crisis where overnight, I mean, literally we went from, something's going on in the world to, we got messages from work and phone calls and news reports that, like, we're shutting down, the end, So we've all experienced that. And so now you can be like, okay, how do you handle when, shit hits the fan for my life?
Yeah, that's the truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Lightning round.
Let's do it.
Are you guys
Let's
ready?
do the lightning round.
All right,
Kim.
All
Sister's
right.
choice questions.
Emmylou, you want to go first?
Yes, I just want to say how amazing you are. Like, I was just going to give you like the biggest hug and be like, you're like my mentor. Like, it's just amazing. So this really hit me and touched me well. Because similar, single parent, taking care of mom, trying to balance everything. So I guess my big question is, how did you keep your sanity during this whole process?
So I agree. Yeah. So one of the things that I know about myself is I'm a very conscientious person. So what that translates to in the way I function is, I like to make plans. I like to have a to-do list. I like things to go a certain way. That gives me comfort. The structure gives me comfort. That kept getting blown up over and over. And it was in this situation that like I couldn't control, I couldn't predict. And I even didn't have an option on how I was going to react. Like the reality was it was going to come at any time. And when it landed on me, like I was going to show up. There wasn't another option, So how was I going to handle that? And so what worked for me is I wrote my daily agenda and my to-do list in pencil. I just made that one change.
Yeah.
And when I wrote it in pencil, it was this really clear message to myself that like, yes, this is how you want your day to go today. But if at any point you just have to like erase the rest of it because it's not how it went, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that was enough to just like help me deal.
Yeah.
I love that.
The daily interruptions.
Yeah.
I love that.
Look at me. Pencil.
Because I am a pen person. So for me, it was
a pen person.
I laugh because I have this beautiful cup of all those little pens, but I'm like, no, let's use the pencil today.
And it's a number 2. Don't worry. That's so true, Kim, because I think that's just kind of a visual, like I can erase this and it didn't happen. Somebody else, Elizabeth Miller with Happy, Healthy Caregiver talks about, she does podcasts too, by the way. We love you, Elizabeth. And so she talks about, instead of a to-do list, she had a to-da list. And instead of, so that way,
here's things to do. It's like, here's what I did on
ta-da. That's exactly right. So every time she checked something off, it would be like, ta-da, I did it, instead of like, I must do it. So it's really interesting how we have these shifts and how we trick our brains and really trick ourselves to say, I'm going to just reframe this. And I'm going to give myself grace and permission. And it was the hardest thing for me because I am a perfectionist. I love structure. I like things to go as planned. And with caregiving, nothing can go as planned. It's just like,
Yeah. I will also say, Emily, you may not go through this, but we were in very similar situations, like 2 children, single, going through care, right? Crisis, like we've talked about crisis in this conversation, and we often like that. For me, we defined it as like that phone call where I thought something terrifying was happening to my children, and we will often define crisis as very big things, but our bodies react to even small things as a crisis. And when you're caring, it's very likely that you have a daily crisis or multiple crises within a day. And we are still very hardwired, like the person who was being chased by the lion and their life was at risk. And then they escape it, they ran away and they got back to their village. And what they did to tell their body that was over is they told the story. They like sat down around the fire and said, I got chased by a lion and I ran away and I got away and now I'm here. And it tells our body physically, we're done. We still need that. And that was something I had to pull in. Like, I need a way to tell my body that I'm closing this crisis loop and it is over. And a lot of times that is getting the story out of your body. And that could just be writing it down, like journal, and just be like, this happened today and mom did this and it made me feel this way. And I'm really pissed off about it, but it's over and now. Okay. And that's all you need to do. But you need to get the story out and you need to close that crisis so that you can have another one tomorrow. And if we don't do it typically. And so you have all these open crisis loops in your body. And that's for me, I'm still so unhealthy physically from all the stuff I went through that like I'm still trying to catch up and like get the weight I gained off and deal with all the things, the way my body manifested crisis and stress, which I grew tumors in my body. So I'm still like getting those. So take care of yourself in that way. Close your crisis loops somehow.
It's so true.
I love that.
I absolutely do, because they talk about caregivers after or during have chronic illnesses. Yeah. And I know that another person that we had talked to, he had been caring for his son with disabilities, he and his wife 15 years into it. I mean, it is epitome of like every day you're living in your stress response system is just an overdrive, and you just become so used to it. You don't realize you're living in a state of crisis, which is what I lived in with Jason. And I'll tell you, when I came home, I crashed. Like all of the adrenaline and all the cortisol that was flowing through my body to keep me going at this high octane pace. And I came home and it was just like, I felt like, oh my God, I didn't know what was wrong. And I couldn't think. And so I would totally agree. I think closing the crisis loop, I like how you refer to that. I think that is so on point, because people don't realize. I know, Emily, you text us. We have a text group, which is probably we have a book on our own of text messages and memes.
I get around. Yeah, I'm the person that sits at the fire and just tell all the stories of what happened today. And even if they don't respond, it just completely releases and I let it go. And plus they get a good laugh because I'm all about the silver linings and laughing. So they are my tribe.
That's exactly right. And I will tell you, as you know, Emily sent me something last night, and, for people who are like, how do I be a caregiver to a caregiver? Because that's what I feel like I am to Emily. I want to be a support to Emily. And because I want to be a support to my mom, but I really want to be a support to Emily, who is in the trenches. Like, she's got mud up in her nose right now. And so sometimes, though, it's not about giving her an answer. Actually, most times it's, I hear you, and this is hard. And this is hard. There are no words to say. I cannot believe you dealt with that crap today. Like, I am mad for you. And I think that's so important to validate.
And sometimes those are the words we want to hear. Like, I'm not looking out for the answer. I'm not looking out for the answer. Like, I can do that part. I just want someone to be like, that's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a dumpster fire. And then you can be like, you. I know it was, right? And
dumpster fire meme keeps going through the thread.
And you're done. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I want to ask my question. So this is an interesting one. We all have stories where you're like, okay, you can't even make this up. And it's funny because otherwise you might cry. But what is like a funny caregiving story that you might have? And it could be with Bonnie, but something that's funny that you're like, I am not even making this crap up, because like I always use my example when I had to crawl under the stall at the dirtiest Walmart in North Carolina universe. And I'm like, and because my mom had gotten sick and it was a mess, because respectful of my mom, but it was a mess. And it wasn't like, she got sick. People get sick. I crawled under, military crawled. You can't even make that up. And I just did it. Like, didn't even think. I'm like, well, I'm going to have to get under here. So here I crawl. And so
have you got a funny?
What's your funny?
Yeah. And it is with Bonnie. And I also feel very, like, we are very open with our stories, and we laughed about this. So it also played into, I'm really strong physically. And so Bonnie's always like loved, like I can literally just like bend down, grab her underneath her butt and just like pick her up, and she loves it kind of thing. So, when she was, in the time when she was broken, we have stairs in the house, right? And so her knee was broken, and then the opposite elbow was broken. So it's like across the body. So it's not like you could even lean up against a wall to handle the one good leg you have. Like, there's no way to leverage, So and when you're in these situations, you might have like a disabled parent or someone that you're caring for. You're just trying to figure out the logistics of getting them from like point A to point B. And life for us is predominantly upstairs. Like our offices are there. The bedroom is upstairs. It's where we consume our entertainment. You know, like you can live upstairs and not go downstairs if you need to, you know. So we just needed to get her up the stairs, right? So we were able to, she had to sit down and go up each stair, like a butt at a time. And I had to just like lift her like, okay, butt, and then up a stair. We get to the top of the stairs and she's sitting at that, you know, like we're done, we're at the threshold, but then you're at the top and we got to get you now to the bed, but you can't stand up by yourself. And I was like, how are we going to get you into the bed? Like, so I have Bonnie trapped on the floor, just sitting on the floor. Like, where do I go from here? And I was like, I have an idea. So I went and got a beach towel and I lifted up one side of her butt, stuck the beach towel under, lift up the other side of the butt, stuck the beach towel under. We got it down. I said, pulled the beach towel in between her legs. And I said, grab the beach towel in between your legs. So you're holding on. I got behind her, wrapped that beach towel around, and I pulled her all the way down the hall and into the bedroom to the bed. And she's just like, I'm just like dragging her across the floor. And I'm like, how do you get in these positions sometimes? Like I'm in this situation, I'm like watching it happen. And I'm like, what is life right now?
Yeah.
What's life right now? And then we start figuring out other mechanisms. But for that, like day one, we get you back from the ED and you're like okay, I've broken bones. And like, we got to get you up. And how to do that. You just figure stuff out. And sometimes you like observe it and you're like, what am I doing right now?
Yeah.
Why am I using a ladle to like, you know, it's just like weird stuff.
You were the MacGyver. Like anybody who's old will know, older will know MacGyver. And MacGyver could put like, you know, a toothpick,
rubber band and
a battery, and boom, you get a bomb. And so you're like, and so you were the MacGyver of transporting.
Yeah,
that's right.
Beach towel, that's good.
Amazing. I like that. So super smart. All right, Jane.
This is the last one.
Last one. We got the last one.
It could be anytime. What is one guilty pleasure?
Oh, I love guilty pleasure.
Sneak around. You can like mine is a bag of Oreos, and I don't freaking share. Like, what is something that you laugh about and say, "All right, this is like my thing."
Yeah. My favorite guilty pleasure is going through the Starbucks drive-thru and not else, like just for me. So as a mom, you know that like the whole eating a candy bar in the closet is like, it's real because for 12 years, I have had to share my food, like everything. If someone like, oh, she has M&Ms, I'm going to be like, oh, here you go, like doling it out, you know? So I have to share my food all the time. I have to think about other people all the time. Like, I'm going to Starbucks. Do you also want a Starbucks? Like, and sometimes I'm in that mindset, but sometimes I just want to like, I see the little mermaid in the circle and I'm like, I just want to do that for me. I just want to drive through, pick out what I want and drive away and be like, ha ha ha, I did something just, and it's like, I don't get to be selfish very often, you know? So that is something like if I'm able to do it and I have the time and I could leave 10 minutes early to go pick up the girls and grab the Starbucks. And I'm like overly sneaky about it. Like no one gives a flying F that I did it. Like no one cares, but I think they do. And so I'm like, I'm going to go get the Starbucks and then I'm going to throw the cup away before the kid gets in the car. So they don't even
you go to the next level.
Yes.
See the Starbucks is like, awesome. Good for you. But for me, I'm like, aha, they don't even know I did it. And I did it just for me. Like I feel equal and I don't get to do that very often.
Ultimate self-care.
Secret mission. That's sister. You know what? That is, and that is a strategy that is 100% sister approved.
Oh, absolutely. That is sister approved.
How can I like throw the wrapper like, oh, they don't even know I ate those M&Ms. Like, ha ha.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
Kim, we cannot thank you enough for coming.
We love you.
We have had such a great time.
Yes.
Like when we come to Roanoke, we just want to hang out with you. We'll sneak you out and go to, we won't even tell your kids we're taking you to Starbucks. We'll be like, oh no, we're going somewhere serious.
Very serious.
So thank you so much. And thank everybody for joining us today. We know everybody is super busy, and it means the world to us that you just come on and listen to the confessions of caregivers that are really changing the world.
Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.